What secret do you hide from your family and will take to your grave? Story 1. My mother was really sick in 2008. I was turning 25, with a younger brother and sister. We had lost both of my grandparents on my mom's side to cancer a few years prior. My mom had to watch as her parents slowly passed away. It broke her not having her mother around, as they were very close. My mom was in and out of the hospital for 6 months, from the summer to the fall of 2008, with a couple of instances where her blood was septic. She recovered, but the doctors continued to run tests on her. One day I stopped by the hospital to check on her, and the doctor was in the room when I walked in. He told her she had cancer and that chemotherapy had a chance to help her, but it would mean she would be dealing with it for the foreseeable future. My mom told me she wasn't going to do any treatment. She said that no matter what, she was going to be home for the holidays, and that I couldn't tell anyone what the doctor said. I never told anyone. She left the hospital like it was any other day. Thanksgiving came, and she gave a speech before the meal about how she loved everyone, and she began to cry. I knew why. Everyone else just thought it was because she felt blessed. Shortly after Christmas, she passed. She got her last wish to spend the holidays with the family. After she passed, the doctor told everyone cancer was the cause of death. I never said a word to anyone then, and I still haven't to this day. Story 2. Late to the thread. When I was maybe 12 or so, I saw my dad crying in his bedroom with his shotgun in his mouth. My parents divorced a year or two after that incident, and parents have a strange tendency to ask kids who they want to live with when they split. My dad was always a mean and often drunk man, so it was no surprise my brother chose to stay with my mom. I thought my dad might need some connection to family. I was 13 or 14 and moved in with him. We had a good 2 years and then he met someone. I lived on my own for part of sophomore year, all of junior, and most of senior year of high school. I was asked to come live with them eventually, and that barely worked out. So after 2 more years, I was on my own again. During that time, he was diagnosed with a terminal illness. He tried to hurt me in a drunken rage twice. My brother was there for the second time. I was angry, but also sad, and I felt bad for him. We grew apart once we had some distance between us. I got married, had kids, and started living a decent life. He is older now, more calm, more appreciative of life. We're not super close, but we talk again. We see each other, and he knows my wife and kids. He is having a rough time slowly fading, and I'm having a rough time coming to terms with it all. But as I grew older, I started to learn more about his story, his life, and what he was going through when I was just a kid. I'm glad he's still around, and I'm glad he's happy whenever he's not in pain. I lost my best friend to cancer when I was in my early 20s, and I'm not in a rush to lose my dad now, too. Anyway, thanks for reading. Story 3. When I was 21, I lived in my college town for a year despite dropping all of my classes. I took out $25,000 in student loans and tried starting a t-shirt business. It failed miserably, and I re-enrolled the next year. My parents and friends were none the wiser. Update. Okay, so here's why I took out the student loan instead of a business loan. Because I was an inexperienced 21-year-old. I used to take out $5,000 for fraternity dues, travel, and groceries at the beginning of each school year. One day I had the bright idea to take out an extra $20,000 and start a small business to make bank. I felt like the t-shirt market was underserved. Learned pretty quickly it was not. Did no research upon starting the company and just tried to rely on online sales. Once the check cleared, I dropped all but one of my classes. Intro to Entrepreneurship. I want to go back in time and slap myself in the face, and just kept the money. It was a poorly thought out idea that I'm still paying for today. As for me, I still graduated in 4.5 years after some help from intensive online classes in summer school. Basically told my parents I was adding a minor to my degree, and I paid for the last semester myself. Still, learned a lot about myself. Loans will be paid off in 2 years. Story 4. When my mom died, I was given her wedding ring. The ring she and my dad shared. I was 16. Whenever I missed her, I would hold it and think of her. My family has always been difficult, and my dad was emotionally and physically abusive. He kicked me out at 19 for speaking up about it, and my boyfriend walked out on me after 3 years about a year later. I ended up using the ring to pay for rent when I had a breakdown and couldn't find a job that paid well enough. I know I didn't do anything wrong and that it was the right decision at the time. I just can't imagine telling my family and being verbally attacked for it. especially when I was on my own and none of the people who should have been there for me were. I want the ring back. It made me feel close to her. But sometimes life just doesn't go the way you hope. Story 5. That my first girlfriend was emotionally and physically abusive toward me. She was 15, I was 16, I'm now 25. After we started an intimate relationship, she became very possessive and controlling. She wanted intimacy constantly. When I wasn't in the mood or was busy, she'd threaten to hurt herself, and it worked most of the time. Eventually, she started threatening to hurt me instead, and that worked even more. The few times I resisted, she'd take out a blunt object or a knife and injure me. I have a few scars on my arms and back from those moments. Thankfully, no cigarette burns remain. It's something I'll probably never tell anyone, aside from anonymously like this. Maybe my future wife will be the first to know, but even then, it'll take a lot of time to open up about it. My mother sometimes asks me why I don't have a girlfriend, and this is why. I'm scared of women. Not terrified, just filled with anxiety and discomfort. I'm still attracted to women, but I don't approach anyone. And I avoid interest because there's always this thought, why would I risk being in that position again? I've gotten better, just still hesitant about relationships. Story 6. My second abortion. They know that when I was assaulted and had to take post-exposure medication, I found out I was pregnant from it. I started to miscarry, but it was incomplete, and I had to have a medical abortion to finish it. I'll never tell them that, not too long after that. My boyfriend at the time tampered with his protection to try to get me pregnant so I wouldn't leave him. I wasn't going to, but he turned out to be very insecure. I was still recovering physically and emotionally from what had happened, and very quickly couldn't keep food or water down because of nausea. It was too risky to continue the pregnancy, and I was hundreds of miles away from my family with no way to move closer. I had a vacuum aspiration abortion while conscious. It would break my dad's heart to know the guilt, pain, and shame I've endured so soon after everything else. Story 7. I have secrets of my own, but I'm too paranoid to tell them. So I'll share a story from my dad that he never admitted to his own mother and only told his father after her passing in 2006. My dad was 10 at the time, so this would have been either 1971 or 1972. His mother was making Jell-O, or whatever gelatin snack they had in those days. She finished the boiling process and put the big tray of Jell-O in the freezer. She then made a big deal about not touching the Jell-O before it set. A while later, my dad got curious as to whether it had set and decided to test it. He reached into the freezer and poked the Jell-O, and sure enough, it hadn't set yet. A few hours later, his mom checked it and found a fingerprint in the now set Jell-O. She brought my dad and his sister over and told them to hold out their index fingers. She compared their fingers to the print left in the Jell-O and quickly determined that it was my dad's sister. As a result, she wasn't allowed any of the Jell-O. How did my dad get away with it, you might ask? He tested it using his pinky. Story 8. Throwaway. FYI, I'm a guy. Bit of a long one. But anyway, years ago, my girlfriend, we'll call her Deb, and I were out with her friend, we'll call her Sarah. This one day, Sarah had to unlock her phone with a PIN every time to take one of many pictures. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her PIN. I saved it in a note. Months later, Sarah and Deb were at my place and went to the pool. Sarah left her phone indoors. I used her password and hit the jackpot. Private photos, videos, message logs with some guy she was talking to, we'll call him Jeff, along with tons of inappropriate pictures and videos of him. Now, Deb was attractive, but Sarah was someone who had worked incredibly hard on herself and become really confident and radiant. With this collection of photos and videos, I came up with a slow plan. Very slow. I slowly broke up with Deb but kept in touch with Sarah. I then created an alter ego online, we'll call it Vanessa. For months, I built up this identity to look real. This identity started following Sarah on all her social media. Sarah accepted all friend requests. Vanessa blackmailed Jeff. Jeff was given 2 days to stop talking to Sarah or his pictures would get leaked. He panicked and cut things off, but Sarah was strong-willed. When Vanessa threatened Sarah to stop talking to Jeff or her photos would be leaked, she protested, so I knew I had to change tactics. Vanessa disappeared for a while until I could get access to Sarah's phone. One day, Sarah was over and lost her phone at my place. I found it the next day, but not before I installed a tracking app that let me monitor her phone activity. A few weeks later, Vanessa returned, now with access to Sarah's conversations. While monitoring her reactions and suspicions, I made it look like Vanessa wasn't real. All my friends knew I was pretty tech-savvy. One day I was talking with Sarah, and she broke down crying, telling me how she'd been long-distance messaging someone, and now she was being blackmailed by a stranger. She asked me to help. Story 9. That while I love my parents and family, I also deeply resent them. I grew up with parents who definitely loved me and my siblings, but everything was always our fault. I remember being attacked in school while protecting a friend's younger brother from a group of about 10 to 11 people. It wasn't life-threatening, a screwdriver to the back, but I remember my dad saying that maybe if I wasn't so different, it wouldn't have happened. I was an emo grungy type, one of the outcasts. I was suspended from my first real job for a false reason. When I explained to my parents exactly what I was told, the first thing they said was, "You probably did something else." They were in the same field, different roles in law enforcement, and helped me with the suspension because the union refused to support me. My face didn't fit. When I was sent the evidence they were going to use against me, my parents discovered the 40-page booklet was actually 5 sheets photocopied multiple times, and there was no evidence. I still got blamed. "You must have done something." Even after my hearing lasted 5 minutes and I was reinstated, they still treated me like I was in the wrong. The third instance was more recent. Since my siblings and I all moved out, my parents started fostering. A couple of kids live there now, and I get along fine with them. Considering their rough starts, I have huge respect for my parents for taking them in. Over Christmas, I was back visiting, and at some point, some sweets went missing. When questioned, one of the foster kids blamed me, saying they saw me eating them. I hadn't. I told my mom I didn't even know what sweets were there, but she didn't believe me, because 10 years ago, I once took sweets without asking. I was accused of being a thief and a liar. I wanted to scream, but just walked away. I respect and love my parents, but they never see how much they hurt and scar me. Ever since I moved 150 miles away, my mom texts or calls constantly. If I don't respond in a day, she gets anxious. I've thought about ending my life every day for the last 2 years. Every time I talk to my mom, I have to pretend everything is okay, that I'm doing well in school and staying healthy, when in reality, I've dropped out twice. I'm 7,000 pounds in debt, barely eating or sleeping, not socializing, and just barely functioning. I try to avoid talking to her because I hate lying to her constantly. I know I'm posting late, but it's been so long since I've gotten any of this off my chest. I know this might not be as serious as some other things I've read here, but thank you if you're still reading. As a treat, here's something I've never told anyone, and probably never will. My first time was with a girl who had just broken up with someone I used to hang out with. We had stayed friends, and one day after her breakup, we hung out at my place while my parents were on holiday. We were fooling around, and when the topic of S came up, I said no, because she had just broken up and I was 16 and not very confident. I woke up groggy a few hours later to find her on top of me. I pushed her off, but I knew what had already happened. She got back with her ex a few weeks later, and 10 months after that, she had a baby. So yeah, I know what happened to me wasn't okay, but I never said anything. People don't believe guys can be hurt that way, and considering I was 6 feet 6 inches at 16 and played football and rugby, no one would have believed me. I don't know whose child it is. We stopped talking soon after, but it still haunts me. Story 10. That I graduated college. I got a fake diploma and a nice diploma frame, faked some transcripts, even forged a letter from the administration congratulating me. I bought a graduation cap and gown, and just as I was on my way to the ceremony, which would not be naming me to walk, I got in a car accident on purpose just to cover my massive lie. My parents were disappointed they didn't get to see me walk, but it was far better than the disappointment of them finding out that I'd been lying to them for so long about going to school and graduating. I own a mobile development firm, and we just hit $1 million in revenue this past October. I help pay for my grandfather's caretaker, he's 90 years old and lives by himself, and have to subsidize my brother's rent. Otherwise, he'd be homeless. My parents are divorced as well. It would absolutely crush them, but I do it to keep them happy and my family together. Story 11. The procedure I had to remove cysts from my ovaries in January was actually me having an abortion. The only people I've told are my boyfriend, who is incredibly supportive and is making sure this is something we cope with together, and who I'm sure I'll marry someday and have children with, and a friend after a lot of drinks during a long night out. This has been the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with. I've always been pro-choice and figured an abortion was simply a medical procedure. I had no idea that I would continue to bleed for over a month after the procedure, and still am, or the intense emotional pain I would go through. It's very, very difficult having so few people to confide in because I'm scared of judgment. Also, it seems to be a very taboo thing to discuss. Sure, women talk about getting emotional or bloated during their period, but abortion? I feel like I've been having an out-of-body experience since it happened. I don't recognize this emotional person who has mood swings at the change of a breeze and snaps at loved ones for such small reasons. I can't control these emotions, nor do I know how to deal with this grieving process, which I wholly did not anticipate. My only relief has been a very small selection of articles I've found after probably thousands of Google searches. I know I couldn't have supported the child and was not ready, but I know I want kids someday, and I feel very confused and sad when I think about what it all means. Story 12. So a year ago, my brother and mom left the house to go see a psychologist, leaving me home alone. I decided that I must use the opportunity to make a rudimentary personal toy. I don't know what I was thinking, but I thought it would be a good idea to tape 2 water balloons together, lubricate the space between, and use that. This was a bad idea. I used normal balloons and filled them with both air and water, then used duct tape to tape them together while sitting on my bed. I didn't like how they were taped, so I tried to remove the duct tape and do it over. Unfortunately, the duct tape was really sticky, and the balloons both popped, soaking my bed in balloonfuls of water. I spent the rest of my alone time trying to dry it with a fan and then a hairdryer, all to no success. I slept on a wet bed that night, but no one knows to this very day, except for you guys. Story 13. That I'm depressed as hell and have thought about taking my life so many times. I don't dare mention it to my family because they'll overreact, and I can't do it because I'm afraid my parents, siblings, spouse, and my little toddler would somehow blame themselves. I think my sisters know something is wrong with me because I'm always at home, and they try so hard to encourage me to go out with them when they have spare time. Sometimes I feel like if I stay here and live for more than 20 years, I'll just end up being a burden to everyone around me. Sometimes I think I might have an underlying mental illness besides depression and anxiety. I just don't know what to do anymore. I can't keep a job because I break down and quit. I don't have any friends to spend time with or even talk to. I feel so lonely. I hate knowing that I was seen as a kid with a good future ahead of me, and my family had such high hopes of me becoming a successful person of some kind. Now I'm just an awkward stay-at-home mom with only a high school diploma and a job history in janitorial services, with no hope for the future. I hope I die from some sort of accident or natural cause, because I just don't want to be here anymore, facing the unknown. Life sucks, but I guess this is nothing compared to a lot of other things posted here, so I really shouldn't be complaining. Story 14. In 3rd grade, I cheated on my history exam. In 4th grade, I stole my Uncle Max's hairpiece and glued it to my face when I played Moses in my Hebrew school play. In 5th grade, I knocked my sister Edie down the stairs and blamed it on the dog. When my mom sent me to summer camp for kids with weight problems, they served lunch and I lost control. I ate everything in sight and got kicked out. But the worst thing I ever did, I mixed a pot of fake vomit at home and then went to a movie theater, hid it in my jacket, climbed up to the balcony, and then I made a noise like this. Wah, 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 wah. And then I dumped it over the side, all over the people in the audience. And then, this was horrible, all the people started getting sick and throwing up all over each other. I never felt so bad in my entire life. Story 15. When I was 18, my mother passed away from cancer. For many years before her death, she was helping my, now also passed away, sister financially, essentially giving her a credit card and access to savings for when she was in need, which she abused endlessly, and left my father in a massive amount of debt when my mother finally passed. Weeks before she was gone, my mother asked me to fetch her purse. She handed me a stack of receipts and other papers stuffed into a small paper bag she had nearby, and told me to burn it and never ever let my father know what I had done because it would just make him even more upset. I burned it. Nobody in my family knows, least of all my father. I never looked too closely at what was in there, but I've always been curious what my father would have done if he had access to it. Makes no difference now, though. They're both long gone, and my dad has retired decently after spending the better part of a decade since my mom's death paying off the debts caused by her and my sister. I don't know who I should be more upset with. It's complicated, and I don't like to think about it much anymore. All that being said, I will never ever tell anyone in my immediate family what my mother asked me to do that day. Story 16. When I was little, my brother had anger issues and he physically hurt me. My parents knew that we fought and wrestled a lot, but they didn't and probably never will know how much it actually affected me. I love my brother and don't blame him at all. He was like 7 or 8 and didn't know his strength. And I blame my parents for not getting him therapy or medication for his anger. But the reason I'll never tell is because the abuse created this deep-rooted paranoia and discomfort around men. It changed how I relate to people, and I've never been attracted to a man because of it. I don't actually feel afraid, but it's like my brain was shaped in a way at a young age that shut off any desire for romantic relationships or trust with men. So basically, that's why I'm a lesbian whose only male friends are gay. But to my family, I will always just be born this way. Story 17. That my mom told me I was her favorite child. I have siblings I don't speak to. Both hold extreme views and are very judgmental. Haven't talked to them in 11 years. And when she was dying, neither one of them wanted to care for her. I was the youngest, by 10 and 4 years. And they were both well off with careers, but neither had time to help our mom. My dad had died a few years earlier. When he was dying, they helped because they thought he had a lot of insurance money. He didn't. I think they didn't help my mom because there was nothing in it for them. She told me one day that she knew I truly loved her, and that she felt bad I was caring for my kids and husband and still taking care of her. She said she felt guilty being a burden, and as awful as it sounded, I was her favorite. I love my parents more than anything. They had huge hearts and warm souls. My dad donated to so many causes. I don't know how my siblings turned out the way they did. When my mom died, my siblings listed my brother's house as her residence, didn't mention me in the obituary, and I didn't get any card or flower from any relative. They all went to their homes. It didn't matter. It was just cards and flowers. But the cruelest twist came at the funeral. I look exactly like my mom when she was younger. People stopped cold when they saw me. Some hadn't seen me in years, and they all said I was a spitting image of her. My siblings seethed quietly. Shortly after that, I cut ties with them. I couldn't imagine having a favorite child, but for my mom to say that to me, she must have known they were truly unkind. I'll always feel bad that she knew they didn't want to help her. That part still hurts. Story 18. When I was about 12, being a white kid in a mostly black neighborhood, it was hard to be accepted, so I conformed. I pretended like I knew what the other boys were talking about when it came to relationships and intimacy. The internet was still new and content like that wasn't easily available. So by today's standards, I was extremely sheltered. All I knew was the basics about reproduction. Now, I truly am ashamed of what I did, but being that young, I remember it as nothing more than curiosity. My parents were divorced. I lived with my dad, and my sister lived with my mom. She came to visit, and I waited until she was asleep to see. She was 2 years older, by the way, and I did just that. But I went too far and touched her with my finger to see what it felt like. She was wearing loose pajama shorts. What I didn't realize is that I lined it up perfectly and ended up going farther than I meant. She immediately rolled over, and I panicked and left the room thinking I might have hurt her. I still feel guilty and ashamed for it. But I've also come to terms with the fact that I had no malicious or sual intent and that it was driven by curiosity. She's never acted differently toward me, nor I to her. But if she ever brought it up, I would deny it completely. Story 19. That I almost drowned in a river when I was 13. I was throwing empty cans in and shooting at them with my pellet rifle as they floated downstream. The edge of the river was steep and slippery. It had been raining too, so the water was running fast. I stepped closer to the river to relieve myself behind a tree. And before I could even pull down my boxers, the ledge gave way. I managed to turn as I fell and dig my fingers into the dirt. It was really muddy though, and every time I tried to pull myself up, I just ended up pulling out handfuls of mud. The water was cold and I nearly lost my grip a few times. Eventually, I dug out enough dirt to grab a tree root and pull myself up. I pulled my pants up and went home. No one was there, so I just put my clothes in the washer and took a bath. The next day, my mom's boyfriend at the time made a comment about the big mark I had made sliding in. He thought a turtle had made the mark. Story 20. I was 16, living in Portland with my parents. My first job was as a dishwasher at a local family-owned restaurant. Two of my good friends worked there as busboys. The place was always busy, and it was a great job to have as a kid. Dirty work, slightly stressful, but the whole kitchen staff was quirky and fun to work with most of the time. I had saved that summer to buy my first car, a 1979 Chevrolet Caprice Coupe. The car was a monster. Horrible fuel economy, leaked or burned quarts of oil weekly, temperamental when starting up, and totally unsafe in bad driving conditions with its combination of a 350 V8, dodgy handling, and bald tires. However, it was reliable and could carry a lot of people comfortably. One Friday night after work, after we'd been paid in cash, we were sitting around in the closed kitchen discussing weekend plans. Since we were really into skateboarding at the time, we'd often talked about visiting San Francisco to hit up some of the famous spots we'd seen in videos and magazines. Why not go now? Tonight? We had enough cash and good transportation. What could go wrong? We made the journey from Portland to San Francisco in about 12 hours, rotating drivers. It was amazing. None of us had ever been to California. We bought maps along the way to figure out our route, remember those days? And ate at greasy pancake houses and loaded up groceries in the massive trunk. The 350 engine guzzled gas and oil at practically every service station. I'll never forget crossing the Golden Gate Bridge. We should have been totally sleep-deprived, but instead we were wide-eyed and amazed. Everything was new. California drivers, giant freeways, navigating the Bay Area's traffic, and spending a weekend, mostly on foot or skateboard, exploring the city. There was only one issue. We'd all given our parents vague stories about our weekend plans and definitely hadn't told them we were leaving town. We got back Monday morning before school, then went to class like it was any other day. When I got home, my parents knew something was up. For one, the front of the car was covered in bugs, and even though we cleaned out the trash, I forgot to throw out the maps. I have a feeling they found them later and figured it out, but they never said anything. Story 21. My family sees me as the man I am and tells me how proud they are. I have a loving wife, 3 wonderful kids, a nice home, a college degree, and a good job with a promising future. They have no idea that shortly after high school, I became heavily addicted to substances. I lived with a friend, and his dad paid our rent. I worked at a small factory and spent $40 a week on food and gas. The rest went to my habit. Ironically, what got me off one drug was being introduced to something even more dangerous. I would do anything to get it. At one point, I was buying supplies in bulk and trading them for what I needed. My friend's dad was involved in making it. He's now in prison, and had an endless supply. Eventually, I hit rock bottom. I quit my job, got kicked out of my apartment, and asked my parents if I could move back in. Thankfully, they welcomed me home. I was taking a shower when it hit me. I couldn't live like this anymore. They noticed mood swings but never questioned me. I cut ties with everyone in that world and got a job at a small pizza shop. Unfortunately, I went back to other substances for a while. Then I met a woman who never pressured me to quit. But when I complained about my life, she told me that you can't expect a good outcome from bad decisions. That stuck with me. I've been clean for 6 years now. I'll always struggle with the urge, but I know my wife and kids need me healthy. My parents and sisters have no idea. Story 22. When I was a child, my older sister constantly picked on me. Nothing physical or inappropriate, but it was relentless emotional stress. She tricked me, laughed at me, and wore me down daily. My parents ignored it because they understood what she was going through, and she was the gifted child, while I wasn't. As a 5-year-old, I remember just screaming in frustration while my parents stood by. Whenever I complained, they'd say things like, "Anger is a choice," or tell me to be more understanding of others' perspectives. For years, I looked up to her, hoping the few kind moments would become more frequent. When I say it drove me mad, I mean it. I've since been diagnosed with schizophrenia. I don't think my parents know why. I don't bring it up because when I was being diagnosed, I made all kinds of statements while trying to make sense of my emotional chaos, my deep trust issues, and my intense sensitivity to anything related to certain philosophies, especially those that minimize personal pain. But even though my feelings were valid, they didn't explain everything. Still, after multiple breakdowns, I came to realize that the person I idolized was the root of so many problems. If I told my parents now, they'd just ignore it and try to fix things between me and my sister, not realizing that would make it worse. Honestly, I just want distance from all of them. They mean well, but they don't truly hear me. They substitute their own assumptions for my actual words. And for anyone wondering, I do take my medication regularly. It took a long time to find the right balance, and there's nothing enjoyable about being off it. Story 23. I knew my mother was having an affair for years, and I didn't say anything. I was just a child. I loved my mother and didn't want her to leave. I used to hear her on the phone with him while I was sitting in the room. She'd tell me it was her cousin Jenny, and sometimes she'd ask me to leave the room so she could speak to her privately, but I could hear a man's voice on the other end. Even though I was young, I wasn't naive enough to believe she'd be talking about the things she was discussing with a cousin, and certainly not for hours every day. I used to hear my dad approaching the room while she was on the phone, and she didn't realize. He got suspicious sometimes when she'd suddenly hang up. So when I heard him coming, I'd try to distract him or make noise to alert her so she could hang up. I would wake up to sounds downstairs. When I was really young, I thought it was water dripping. As I got older, I realized it was her kissing someone. Now I know it was her being intimate with him in our living room. I asked her a few times when I was little what was going on, and she told me it was just water from the tap. My dad worked night shifts, so inviting someone over at night was the perfect opportunity for her. She went away with him a couple of times, and my dad knew about those trips. What he didn't know was how long this had been going on and how I tried to protect her. During arguments, I used to defend her and say she wasn't doing anything wrong. I was too scared of them getting divorced. I still feel guilty. My dad passed away a few years ago. He struggled with drinking throughout my life, and I believe her emotional distance contributed to it. She made him sleep on the couch for as long as I can remember, while she had a double bed upstairs. Her excuse was that he snored and kept her awake. My poor father never had a proper bedroom during most of my life. I also quietly resent my mother for putting me through all of that. I don't know how she didn't notice what I was doing to help her or how it affected me. Since my dad died, she's acted like the heartbroken widow. I was told to comfort her, even though I was the one who watched him pass. She's guilt-tripped me for not visiting her as often as she wants because she lives alone. And now my brother resents me because he thinks I'm heartless. He doesn't know the truth. She's gained all the sympathy from him, other relatives and family friends, even though she never truly cared for my dad. And now she wants us to support her. I think this resentment is my biggest secret. If my brother knew, I think he'd hate me forever. Story 24. The time some friends and I accidentally caused a house fire, or when I was off-roading with friends and ended up driving into a river. I can share more details if anyone wants. In elementary school, I was friends with some wild kids. One day we decided to explore a big abandoned house. It had been damaged by a fire a long time ago and left as is, but it was still mostly standing. The doors and windows were gone, and a surprising number of plants had grown where the sunlight reached inside. We walked around the first floor but found nothing interesting. The only staircase to the second floor was destroyed, so the only place left to explore was the basement. We lit candles. No idea why we didn't use flashlights, and split up. One of the quietest kids found a hidden room behind a bookshelf. He walked in alone, and one of the more energetic kids got an idea. He blew out his candle, snuck up behind the quiet one, and screamed as loud as he could. The quiet kid dropped his candle and ran out yelling, with the other chasing after him. We all heard the noise and ran upstairs. Everyone was arguing, and then the smoke detector went off. Smoke was coming from the basement. We panicked and ran straight to our group leader's house. Fire trucks passed by, and we sat there crying, convinced we were going to jail. Eventually we went home, one by one, running through the neighborhood and trying to avoid cops, who were not actually looking for us. It was a condemned property and already written off, but we definitely caused the fire. I've never told my parents. I'm pretty sure I'd still get in trouble even today. Story 25. That I've been living with paranoid schizophrenia since I was around 14. I remember one of my friends telling me about her psychiatrist's questions during her depression treatment. One of the questions was about hearing voices, and until that point, I thought everyone heard them. 2 years later, I asked my doctor to refer me to a counselor. After a few sessions, he told me in confidence, he was a trainee and not allowed to make formal diagnoses, that his supervisor had reviewed our recorded sessions. The first two were taped for his training, with my consent, and said I showed signs of schizophrenia. He explained what the condition was and that I appeared to have a relatively mild case. That conversation helped me become more aware of what I was experiencing and improved my ability to cope. I'm 19 now. My delusions have become more vivid, but I no longer find them as limiting as I once did. My closest friend knows. He jokes that people like me are just wired differently and makes me feel a little more normal. I doubt I'll ever tell my family. They don't need to know what I see when I look at them. Story 26. As much as I miss him, I was somewhat relieved when I found out my uncle had passed away by his own hand. He was the youngest of my mom's siblings and had been in and out of jail since he was maybe 16. He got involved with gangs, developed an addiction to dangerous substances on top of drinking problems. His mind deteriorated rapidly. He began hearing voices that told him to hurt my family. He lived with us at the time. We moved out and rented that house to my aunt, who had kids ranging from around 6 to 10 years old. The voices kept telling him to harm my dad and my aunt's partner, who he believed were spying on him through implants and microphones in his room. We tried so hard to help him, but nothing worked. I truly believe it was for the best that he passed before something worse happened. My mom is now very sad, but still functioning. I can't imagine what life would have been like 5 years from now, with him declining and my mom getting older, still trying to care for him. I obviously can't say any of this to my family, especially not my mom. Like I said, I do miss him. He was like a big brother to me. But in the long run, I think what happened may have prevented something much worse. Story 27. I've been an atheist since maybe 13 or 14 years old. I was skeptical even before that. Around that time, I started having seizures and was eventually diagnosed with epilepsy after having one at school in front of a bunch of people. Luckily, our school was huge, so only a few people saw it, and they were either strangers or close friends, so it wasn't too awkward. I went to a neurologist a week later, did all the tests, and got the confirmation. Mine are pretty mild. I just black out for about 1 to 2 minutes, stare into space with my mouth hanging open, and then come back like nothing happened. Getting diagnosed with a tough condition like that brings you down to earth. At least it did for me. I started thinking, if there's a higher power in control of everything, why allow something like this? It didn't sit right with me. My whole family is very religious. They go to church a few times a week and donate a lot. I've stopped going, except on major holidays where I'm kind of forced to. They know I'm more liberal and not super religious, but I don't think they have any idea how much I dislike the whole experience. I doubt I'll go to my grave keeping it all in. My brother will probably figure it out at some point. Still, saying it out loud would make life a lot harder right now. Story 28. The one thing I'll never tell my parents is that I had an abortion, not a miscarriage. I had only been with my boyfriend for a few months. I used to let my exes be careless because I thought I was infertile and couldn't get pregnant. My boyfriend hated protection just like I did, but he didn't want to take risks, so he always pulled out. Yes, pre-ejaculation exists, but we were reckless and nothing had happened before. Then one day I called him crying because I wanted to tell him I loved him. I thought I was crying because of my past abusive relationships, which made it hard for me to be emotionally open. He thought I was about to tell him I was pregnant. I wasn't. I just loved him. A week later, I was at his place watching the V8 races, and I felt horrible. I made bacon and mushrooms but couldn't eat any of it and just felt sick. Given how emotional I had been, I decided to take a pregnancy test. It was positive. I told my family because I was freaking out. I didn't believe in abortion. I was raised that way. And I've never liked the idea of raising kids. I went to my boyfriend's house, and the first thing he said was, "You should consider abortion." I was furious with him, but we weren't ready. Neither of us. After a few days, I agreed that if I was under 7 weeks, I'd go through with it. I'd been nauseous and sick for weeks already. The stress was overwhelming. I was under 7 weeks, so I had the abortion. A week later, my family asked about the baby. I told them I had a miscarriage, just to avoid the backlash. Story 29. I used to steal internet from a close elderly family friend. I was around 14 to so about 15 years ago. My family didn't have internet at home, so I took her connection details while helping her with her computer once. Every night, I'd sneak into my sister's room and climb over her bed while she was sleeping. just to reach the only phone socket in the house. My room was 2 rooms away, so I used a 25-foot phone cable. I'd cover the dial-up modem with a pillow to hide the sound while it connected. Then I'd spend the night chatting with people on an old messaging platform. I actually met my first girlfriend that way. I still don't know how I never got caught. I remember one morning my dad told my mom that the phone wasn't working the night before. He didn't know what the internet was. He thought the strange noises coming from the phone line were something bizarre, possibly aliens. Story 30. My mom is a kind, religious woman who lives a simple life. She raised me and my brother after she divorced my dad for being unfaithful. During high school, she also housed a few of my friends for extended periods. She's a good person, but she's extremely nosy. If you left anything out, she'd look at it. She constantly opens my important mail because we share the same initials. Her excuse? I didn't notice. Ha ha ha. After my parents divorced and I'd visit my dad, she'd ask tons of questions. As a teen, I'd eventually give in an answer. I can't stand having long conversations with her. I keep things short. She's well-meaning, though. My dad, on the other hand, has let me down in ways that are hard to forgive. Besides the cheating, I thought he was just a quirky religious guy with corny jokes. He remarried someone who always seems to have health issues that prevent her from working, yet she doesn't qualify for assistance. He's falling deeper into debt trying to support them. At one point, he asked me to put the electric bill in my name so they could move into a new place. It was supposed to be temporary. A year or two later, they lost the house. I got a call from the electric company asking when I'd pay my $2,000+ overdue bill. Turns out he hadn't paid for nearly 8 months. I had to stop the home buying process I was in, pay off that debt, and wait a few months for my credit to recover. I've also loaned him money many times. Altogether, I've lost at least $3,000 because of him. It's frustrating. My brother is a good guy, but he's very religious, and we have opposite interests. I'm the only non-religious one in my family. It's never really been my thing. I find religious communities overwhelming and too intrusive. As for my close friends, we're honestly not great for each other. They're decent people sometimes, but most of them are just really lazy. My mom housed some of them back in high school, and later I did the same once I had a job in my own place. I was living in a low-cost area, making decent money, and they were all unemployed. My best friend since first grade is a smart guy, but without me pushing him to pay rent, I'm certain he wouldn't have a job. Some of them have finally started trying to do better, but I had my first panic attack a couple of weeks ago just thinking about how frustrating it is to be surrounded by people who aren't trying. They don't even share many of my interests, maybe 30% at best. I'm always exploring new things and get excited about them, but when I share, I get mocked. For example, I quit smoking 4 months ago. After a rough breakup at the start of 2015, I spiraled into depression and gained a lot of weight. I'm now trying to take care of myself, but all I get is sarcasm at home. Thanks for the support, but heart problems run in my family and I want to do better. They also act like I'm not allowed to have other friends. If I hang out with anyone else, they complain. I deal with my family and friends by lying. I pretend I'm happy, I give them advice I don't believe, and I keep quiet about things I care about. I don't tell them where I'm going. I recently got a license for concealed carry. Nobody knows. It's mine and I enjoy it privately. I've always been the one people turn to, the favorite to have at a party, the one who listens. And because I listen, I know what to say to keep things smooth. Let them think everything's fine. I'm preparing to leave everything behind and no one will see it coming. Honestly, I'm looking forward to it. I don't really do relationships. Between my parents' divorce and being cheated on myself, I have major trust issues. I also might have some unhealthy patterns around intimacy. I don't really want commitment. I just want space and simplicity. Finally, my career isn't something I enjoy, but it pays well and gives me the freedom to pursue hobbies outside of work. So I'll stick with it for now. So yeah, I don't connect with my family. I'm disillusioned with most of my friends. I'm not passionate about my job, and I don't want a relationship. I've never told anyone I know, and I never will. I have a reputation to maintain. People listen to me, and I get what I want. When I mentioned I was thinking about buying a house, 4 people immediately offered to help me move. That's influence, and I'll keep lying to preserve it. Living a life of lies isn't hard. I forget things easily anyway, so when I get caught, I just chalk it up to bad memory. Everyone leaves happy. Story 31. When we were cleaning out my grandma's house after she passed, I ended up being assigned her bathroom. She had a lot of medication left over from her treatments. She had technically beaten cancer. I spent that entire week in a fog, using her leftover prescriptions while my mom, dealing with the loss of her own mother, would be in tears on and off. She never questioned why I didn't seem upset. There's also the fact that during my first 2 years of college, I wasn't actually staying with friends for half the week. I was staying with my girlfriend, who I met when I was 19 and she was 28. It was actually a great experience and helped me learn how to live more independently. My parents knew about her, but thought she was only 21. They didn't know she had her own place either. She even went on vacation with my mom's side of the family and kept everything a secret the whole time. My mom might have figured it out, but if she did, she never said anything. Story 32. The time I spent the night in the ER with my boyfriend after he tried to take his own life. One weekend during college, I was in my hometown visiting my parents. On Sunday morning, I said goodbye as if I were heading back to school. Instead, I sped across town to my then boyfriend's house because he was having a major fight with his parents, and things were escalating in a really concerning way. His mom could be very emotionally harsh, and neither of his parents understood what depression truly was, something he had been dealing with for a long time. I knew I had to get there fast. By the time I arrived, the police had already been called because he had said he might take all his medication. There were officers outside and he was on the lawn, having already taken a mix of pills. An ambulance arrived and took him to the hospital for treatment and monitoring. I was furious with his parents. I gave a partial statement to the officers while in the same room with them. I couldn't say what was really going on, but I also didn't think it would help. At the hospital, I sat in the ER for hours. He was in and out of lucidity. One of his friends who had been through similar struggles came by and stayed with us. His parents came too, but he didn't want them in the room, and honestly, neither did I. They didn't seem to grasp the damage their words had done. I'm not diagnosing anyone, but his mom's behavior was erratic, and his dad was no help. Eventually, he was moved to the ICU for further monitoring. I had work and classes the next morning in a town an hour and a half away. I stayed with him until 7 a.m., laying in the hospital bed next to him before getting up, driving back to school, and showing up to work at 9 a.m. Looking back, I could have called in sick, but at the time he was barely aware of what was happening and wouldn't have remembered if I was there or not. His friend checked in on him later that day, and I returned that weekend to stay with him at another friend's place, somewhere he felt safer than going back home. That's something I never told my family either. I've never told anyone, friends or family, about any of this. We broke up a few years later, and at this point, it just doesn't feel relevant anymore. Story 33. This isn't from me, but from my high school physics teacher. He was spending Christmas with the family of his girlfriend, now wife, when the family cat passed away. Now, this family really loved that cat, so much so that everyone in the house was too heartbroken to handle burying him. For some reason, they had placed the cat in the trunk of a car, and since it was the middle of winter, the cat had frozen solid. At one point, the family asked my physics teacher to take care of the burial. Being a good sport, he agreed and went out to a nearby tree. Keep in mind, this was deep winter, freezing cold, and the ground was completely frozen. So was the cat. He started digging, but progress was slow and he was freezing. After a while, he looked back at the warm house and then at the not quite deep enough hole. Realizing that the cat might fit if it were, say, shorter, he made a split decision. He used the shovel to shorten the cat, fit both parts in the hole, covered it up, and went back inside like nothing happened. He's never told his wife about it, and probably never will. But that hasn't stopped him from telling generations of high school students. Story 34. This is embarrassing, and I really hope no one I know ever sees this. When I was a little kid, I used to wet the bed. My younger sister did too. We shared a room, and she had the bottom bunk. On nights she had an accident, my parents would just move her into their room so they wouldn't have to deal with it right away. Occasionally, I'd also wet the bed, and I'd just sit there yelling until someone came. I wasn't very pleasant, but it gets worse. Sometimes I'd wake up needing to go to the bathroom, and instead of walking down the hall to the bathroom in the dark, I'd climb down to my sister's bed and go there. My thought process: it had already been peed on, and no one would question it. I know, it's awful. Looking back, I'm pretty sure there were a few times when I did this, even though she wasn't even in her bed. She had just gone to sleep in my parents' room, but I thought I was getting away with something. No one in my family has ever brought it up, and I'll never admit it out loud. For the record, this ended by the time I was 4 or 5. It didn't continue into older childhood. Story 35. About 2 years ago, when I was 16, my dad passed away from brain cancer. My biggest regret is giving my mom the okay to increase his morphine dose. Technically, we were supposed to give him a set amount, but he was in such a miserable state. He wasn't eating, drinking, or responding. This had happened before, and he'd come out of it. But that last time, it felt different. It felt like the end. My dad's side of the family won't speak to us anymore. They think he could have lived longer if I hadn't given the okay. And honestly, I agree. But I don't think they truly understood what he was going through. He told me once that he wanted to go. He felt like a burden and hated seeing everyone sad. They blame me because I was the one who made the decision. They resent me because I knew what he had said and they didn't. I've never admitted that out loud to them because I know it would only make them hate me and my mom even more than they already do. Story 36. That I struggle with kleptomaniac tendencies. Over the years, I've taken things I probably shouldn't have, like electronics and accessories from dorm rooms, and once even a printer, which later got ruined by sprinklers. Over 6 months at one job, I pocketed around $500 worth of gadgets. On a trip to Japan, I took small items from shops, keychains, toys, trinkets, adding up to about $300. I justified it at the time, thinking I'd never return, and they were tiny stores. In elementary school, I took a Game Boy from a friend. He never found out. Most of my phone chargers and headphones were picked up as I walked by tables. I just couldn't bring myself to buy them. I never shoplift from major stores, and I genuinely try to fight the urge. But I often find myself scanning rooms for blind spots or calculating what I'd want if it were free. I'm finally working on bringing it up with my therapist. I know it's a problem, and I'm trying to be better. Story 37. I'm in love with a fictional character. This might not sound important to others, but what's surprising is that this character constantly reminds me of what I'm truly passionate about. I can't stop thinking about her. And yes, I've revealed it's a female character. I find her so compelling that it sometimes feels overwhelming when I think about her. I imagine her in so many different scenarios. I could pretend I don't care, but I'm incredibly self-conscious and insecure. So of course I care about what others might think. A dear friend of mine once said to me years ago, "Sorry to be the one to break it to you, but this is a problem. However, if it makes you happy, go for it." I've read posts and comments online where people respond to confessions like this with, "Nice try, Mom, Dad." But honestly, my family may already suspect something. Either they truly don't care, or they're just extremely oblivious. I feel comfortable sharing this here because no one in my family browses Reddit, and I'm the only one who's into foreign languages. Our native language is Spanish. My other passion is music, and I can say with certainty that my only real goal is to become a musician and songwriter, no matter how long it takes. They don't seem to acknowledge that though, especially since I've failed at everything else. Now that I've mentioned music, girl, and fictional, someone with enough context might figure out who I'm talking about. I tried to avoid that, but I'm too self-conscious, so I'll let it go just this once. Story 38. When I was really young, my dad worked night shifts. If I had a bad dream while he was gone, I'd sometimes sleep next to my mom. One morning around 5 a.m., he came home after a shift in tears. He told my mom he'd been informed that the company he worked for was shutting down and everyone was being laid off. He had been there for about 15 years. It was his first real job after school. He's a proud man, and the only other time I've seen him cry was at his mother's funeral. The secret is, I don't think he realized I was awake and saw how much it affected him. I've never told anyone that I witnessed that. At the time, I thought he was sad because he wouldn't see his coworkers again, like when a kid finds out they can't go back to their school. It wasn't until I got older and started working myself that I truly understood how devastating it must be to lose your only steady job when you have a mortgage and 2 young children to take care of. Story 39. I'm 5 feet 4 inches, but I wear lifts in my shoes that make me look around 5 feet 8 inches or 5 feet 9 inches, depending on what I wear. Boots versus sneakers usually. Pants help hide the difference. After I joined the Army and was away for a while, I came back and, well, I had grown. At least that's what I told everyone. Honestly, my family isn't the most observant. This small change has helped me more than I care to admit. In social situations, at work, even in dating, I tell myself the issue is less about me and more about how others react to height. Maybe it's delusional to think that it makes that big of a difference, but I've seen enough to believe it matters. Now here's the real issue. I've been with my girlfriend for 5 years, and I'm thinking about proposing. Somehow, I've kept this secret the entire time. I think she knows. And even if she doesn't, I'm sure she wouldn't care. Besides the fact that I've been lying about it for so long, she might think there's something deeper going on with how I see myself. I'm not a psychologist, I study math. But I know her, and I know her poetry for me would rise far above something like this. Still, it scares me. For what it's worth, we're technically the same height. I weigh more, but I can easily pick her up. There's nothing obvious about proportion or strength. No one would ever know. Story 40. So here's mine. I'm using a throwaway account because my older brother knows my main one, and he can't keep things to himself. My parents are traditional Chinese and don't believe in premarital intimacy. My girlfriend of 12 years, also my neighbor and now my fiancé, went to the same high school as me. When we were 16, we started sneaking around and seeing each other in private. We were definitely very close and still are. We've always been honest with each other, so much so that lying is nearly impossible. One day when we were 19 and in college, she went back to her hometown. That same weekend, we had a class party with drinks. Her best friend, who's also very attractive, got very drunk and asked me to take her home. One thing led to another, and I made a mistake. The next day, I couldn't take the guilt and confess to my girlfriend. She was furious, but she forgave me eventually. Fast forward 7 years. When I asked both our parents for their blessing to marry her, they still thought we were both inexperienced. They even gave us lectures about the topic. I couldn't help but laugh a little inside. We've had a long and loving relationship already, but I didn't have the heart to tell them the truth. Anyway, we're getting married next month. I couldn't be more excited. Story 41. I just found out a few hours ago that my best friend talks about me behind my back. Most people would be furious, and I probably should be. But honestly, I just don't have it in me to care anymore. This keeps happening to me over and over again. At some point, you start to wonder, does anyone really like you, or do they just keep you around until you're no longer useful? Every time it happens, I convince myself it's my fault. And I can't talk to anyone about it because it'll only cause more drama. Even if I tried talking to my parents, I can't. They love my friends, and I don't want to ruin that for them. I don't have many friends, and the ones I do have all know each other really well. It's hard to distance myself without losing everyone. I've tried so hard to fit in. I've done everything I could, but I can't change who I am. I've even gone along with things I knew were wrong, just to be accepted. I've said things about people I didn't even know, just to agree with my friend. It hurts because I would do anything for the people I care about. I'm loyal to a fault. I don't betray people, and now I'm left with the feeling that maybe none of that loyalty mattered. Story 42. This one my immediate family knows about, and one aunt and uncle know about it. But I was never supposed to know. It was kept very quiet. 6 years ago, my cousin assaulted my older sister. I had no idea at the time. I could tell something was off, but I didn't know what. Our family left suddenly and drove home. We had been guests at my aunt and uncle's house in Yakima. Almost 6 months later, I found a document someone had left out on the table. That's how I discovered what had happened. We never contacted the authorities because that cousin had what was considered a promising future in the military. My sister eventually recovered from the trauma, but the story didn't end there. I visited my aunt and uncle's new house a few months ago and stayed for a couple of days. I spent time with the younger brother of the person who hurt my sister. He had no idea what happened. He only knew that his brother wasn't allowed in their house anymore. He was already struggling emotionally with the recent move, and this only added to it. The way he looked up to his brother made me feel sick inside, but I couldn't say a word.